Evening all on Play Chess and streaming to YouTube as well. Hi all. Okay, I thought we could carry on looking at the Fischer Larsen match. So we haven't yet looked at games 5 and 6. So Fischer was 4-0 up at this point for game 5. So in game 5, Fischer was playing white again, and he started the game with e4. So no surprise there. e4. And now we have Larsen playing c5. I hope the board's okay, by the way. I did a bit of a check. It should be okay. Yeah, it looks okay on preview here. So Sicilian defense from Larsen. Larsen isn't trying to draw or anything. He's still going for a win. He's trying to get a win by playing the Sicilian defense. Usually, it's a fighting opening. So knight f3, and we have d6. The open Sicilian, d4, c takes, knight f6, knight c3. Now here, I'll connect to live book actually. So the most popular move is a6, but this is actually the second most popular, knight c6. Larsen played knight c6 here. And Fischer's speciality is to play this bishop c4 move, so the bishop's glaring down that diagonal. e6, bishop b3, bishop e7, and here bishop e3 is played. That's actually the most popular move, bishop e3. Black castled and white castled. So if we look at this position, in general, this bishop's kind of useful on this diagonal, and sometimes f4, f5 is really dangerous. But in playing the f pawn up, one is weakening this diagonal, so sometimes there's some danger, and sometimes king h1 is useful as well. Let's see exactly how white played this. Let's put on the Kbitzer as well here as just to check things out tactically. For the moment, yeah, it's about equal, this position. And Larsen's move is quite popular, bishop d7. Bishop d7 here. Okay, so bishop d7, and we have this very thematic move f4 without wasting any move with king h1 here. This diagonal is not unsafe for anything at the moment. In fact, okay, so f5 is on the cards potentially, or white could carry on maybe with queen e2 and then build up on the d file, potentially with rook d1. But f5 is the main intention here. We see black playing queen c8, designed against f5. We see this like defensive battery here against that f5 square. But Fischer plays this anyway. He plays f5 anyway. It's a positional idea. He just wants to break down this wall here to make sure this bishop is effective as possible on b3. Black plays now. Knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, and what you'd expect, this defensive battery was set up to try and dissuade white from playing f5. So why not just win the pawn? E takes f5. It's an interesting pawn sacrifice from white. Now the idea isn't to play e takes f5. I think, although it would still be quite dangerous for black, this position. If e takes f5 immediately, that is kind of dangerous for black here. There's some compensation white has. After queen d2, with rook ae1, there's good pressure down these files, so there might be enough for the pawn actually. But actually here, Fischer didn't play that e takes f5. He actually played something different. It's a very, very interesting move. Queen d3, and in some ways this might actually be testing black a lot more queen d3. So white is threatening now e takes f5, protected by the queen and rook. And if we have that pawn there, then it's nice light square control, quite a dominating position to work from. For example, rook f3, rook a-f1, rook g3, and we're looking down at g7 all of a sudden. So does black want to allow e takes f5? Well, he keeps his extra pawn by playing f takes e4. But we're getting this very attacking scenario, maybe an attacking player's dream position almost, after knight takes e4, in that the bishops are looking actually kind of menacing. If you look at both these bishops together, they're looking kind of menacing at black's king. And also we've got this f file now. So does this actually mean anything? Well, black played knight takes e4 after queen takes e4. Okay, what does black do about this bishop? If he plays, well, he can't really play to f6. This is covered now. And look, we're looking at g7. Black plays bishop e6, shielding the bishop like that. But now white is in a position to try and target this g7 pawn. And to do so, it would seem rook f3, rook g3 is entirely logical. Try and target g7. So rook f3, and also of course we can double rooks like this against f7. Black played queen c6, trying to get the queens off. And the funny thing is here, the white queen didn't step back. You might think Fischer would be keen to keep the queens on here. He's sacrificed the pawn, quite a dynamic pawn sack. And you might think a move like queen e3. Funny enough, he didn't play this. If say bishop takes b3, I mean this sort of position could be okay for black. Once that bishop's taken out, the f7 isn't such a problem, and black might be looking forward to defending this position now. So actually what we see instead, believe it or not, is also the top engine choice here. I mean, how many of us, we've sacrificed a pawn, right? How many of us would just play something like queen e3 or queen e2? What would you play in this position if you were white? White to play. Let me give you 20 seconds about this. This is quite remarkable. So white to play, you're a pawn down. This bishop's like being neutralized with this bishop e6. What would you play here? If I give you 20 seconds, can you see what Fischer played here with white? If you want to play chess, please move away from the notation tab so we can play these guess the move quizzes. So white to play here. Funny decision in some respects. Any ideas? So usually in general you'd want to keep the tension for the attack. So Antonio, as I said, take the bishop. Someone played Nc3 rook g3 looks promising. Does rook g3 actually work here? Let's have a quick look at rook g3. I'm not sure it does. We take here, rook takes g7. This doesn't quite work, it seems. Rook g4 check, black can just take here. And it's kind of the end of the attack. Black's just better. No, that's not the idea. It's not a queen sack or anything. Sorry, it was just actually rook e1. He doesn't mind the queens coming off, because actually now there's this e-file pressure against these two bishops. Yeah, it's a funny one. So white is now potentially threatening something like rook g3 next, which is more dangerous. Let's try and determine how much more dangerous. Black in this position actually did take the queen off. Let's imagine black just plays rook c8. Then we've got rook g3 here, and if queen takes, rook takes here, then we take on e4, and we've got this raging attack now. where these bishops are kind of loose. So black immediately after this rook e1 took on e4 here. Bent Larsen took on e4, and we have this position where black's temporarily a pawn up, but there's some big problems here. He actually played d5. Let's have a quick look. If black played bishop takes b3, then here rook takes b3, and we've got e7 attacked and b7 attacked. These little details actually mean black might be a little bit in trouble in this position. Say bishop f6, we can take here, and we can actually get an advantageous position, it seems, like this, for example. So yeah, black doesn't want his pawn structure wrecked. This position's a little bit tricky to get that pawn. Then black is left with a weaker pawn structure, that horrible d6 pawn. So it's an interesting position. Okay, so black didn't want to take on b3. Perhaps he played one of the best moves available. Bent Larsen played d5, and now we do get a brilliant looking move. So guess what? So the rook's attacked. What would you do here with white? So white to play here. If I give you 20 seconds. Any ideas? Okay, now one suggestion is bishop takes d5, because we can get our pawn back, right? But actually taking here we lose the exchange. So no, this isn't too hot. The best you could do here is actually play rook g3 first, f6, then this position is actually okay for black after rook f7. No, a better idea here after d5 is just to play rook g3 immediately. This is what Fischer played, rook g3 immediately. So now if taking here, rook takes g7, rook takes f7, discovered check. Here we get a seesaw check, we've weakened e6, right? Then we can play rook takes e7 check again. And yeah, we're mating actually. The quickest way is like this. Rook g3 check, and then bishop takes f6, mate. So yeah, this is a dangerous thing, this rook g3. So the rook cannot be taken here. This seesaw checking will force a checkmate, in fact. So yeah, just see that again. This is a forced checkmate in 12. Actually, the engine instantly sees it's a forced checkmate in 12. With rook takes g7, rook takes f7. It's a sweet one. Anyway, so I hope you believe that. That's a checkmate in 12. So after rook g3, we have g6 trying to defend things. And now here, white regains his pawn, it seems, with bishop takes d5. So he's using that pin on the other bishop. Now if black did take here, rook takes e7. And white has a certain advantage here, but it's opposite coloured bishops. White has the 3-2 pawn majority. The dark squares are a bit weak, and white seems to dominate a bit the e file in the 7th rank. If something like this, then rook ge3 keeps the domination of the e file for a bit longer, and white has a certain advantage. So anyway, so in this position though, Bent Larsen found a different move, which is interesting. And maybe that's like one of the best tries if he wanted to draw. He actually played bishop d6. So what on earth is going on here? Well, it seems as though black might be winning the exchange. He's looking at that rook and he's looking at d5. what can white do? If he moves the rook, we lose d5, right? We just lose d5. We're just lost if we move the rook. We can't move the rook. There's no amazing sack here, with this rook at least. But, and there's a big but, white has a very, very powerful move in this position after bishop d6. Can you see white play here? So bishop d6, we've got our bishop attacked and our rook attacked. So what would you play in this position? You've regained your pawn. So at the moment it's equal on material. But white has a great move here. Can anyone spot it? Okay, rook takes e6. Well done if you spotted that. Now, if taking like this, then check and rook f7 is forced. Then rook f3 is pretty nasty. Rook f8, f8. And in this position, white can improve the position and maintain the pin because the king's not going anywhere. These guys are not going anywhere. We can just, at leisure, just improve the position. So like this. And bring the king up. Just keep the pin. And white's doing really well here. This is a horrible position for black. We can use the pin at any point. So white's clearly a lot better there. So black does well not to, it's not leading anywhere to do that. No, he takes the exchange with bishop takes g3. Okay, so technically now white moves the rook here and is the exchange down. Not even for a pawn at the moment, but this b7 pawn is going, and we've still got nice pressure with the bishops. The bishop's attacked here. It goes to d6. So yeah, it's a pawn for the exchange now. Rook takes b7 is played. This is an accurate move as you'd expect. Well, the rook is attacked, so it's a logical move. So pawn for the exchange. The bishops are very nicely centralized here. In fact, I would say it's quite aesthetically pleasing, the position for white, with the two bishops in the center. One thing, okay, let's see if black tries something. He tried rook ac8. Let's try this one. Do we just lose another pawn? Yeah, probably white just takes another pawn, and this bishop's holding that one, and this bishop's holding the a8 square. So we're just two pawns up there for nothing much. So black played rook ac8, and white now played c4. So it's only a pawn for the exchange. There's definitely an engine evaluation here, but before I share that with you, do you think? What do you think about this exchange sacrifice? Does this confuse you? Do you think black is better? Who do you think is better? If I ask that question, so it's only an exchange sack for one pawn, right? So what do you reckon about this position? Do you think white's better or black? Now, I'll tell you something. I can relate to this situation of having the bishop pair. From a recent over-the-board game of my own, I remember, quite painful actually, I lost my bishop pair after and blew it. Sometimes, when you have the bishop pair, you know, they're strong. They say the bishop pair is strong, yeah, because you know the strengths of both bishops are coordinated with each other. They're looking at light and dark squares together, and what that means sometimes, I believe, is you sometimes have to make efforts to preserve the bishop pair, or conversely to try and knock out the opponent's bishop pair. A pair of bishops is worth more than just one bishop. You're eyeing both color complexes. Okay, so in this position, how easy is it for black to remove the bishop pair from white? You might think, well, hang on, this king's here. Why can't we just play bishop c5? Can we rob white of the bishop pair here? In fact, in the game, a5 was played, but I think a reasonable question might be, what about bishop c5? Bishop c5 actually, okay, white would have to say goodbye to the bishop pair, but in this particular position, actually it seems whites would be doing quite well with b4, with tempo, because we have got a strong passed pawn here. If black didn't want to give up the exchange, then actually we take this one. We're controlling a8, and actually the bishop's pretty good, and actually now we've got 3 connected passed pawns. So maybe that isn't such a major concern, black playing bishop c5 in this particular position. It all really sometimes depends on the position. There's no entry points for the rooks here really. Any rook e8, well, we can take on f7 in any case, so that rook's stranded. So this wouldn't be very pleasant for black. These pawns are just going up the board, and the rooks are not really doing anything about that. So forget bishop c5. Yeah, it doesn't seem that hot to play bishop c5. Black played a5. And yeah, it seems to be preventing white using his pawns at the moment, but Fischer targets the a pawn again now, and it's protected again rather meekly, bishop c7. But yeah, these bishops are really controlling and helping each other. In fact, I don't know how much thought you've given into the bishop pair, but you know, theoretically you say, well, what is the downside of the light square bishop? In general, it can't see the dark squares. What's the downside of the dark square bishop? Conversely, it can't see the light squares. That's why, as the attacking player, fantastic to have the bishop pair and have it preserved in this sort of position. And also, what's amazing about this bishop pair here is how beautifully centralized they are. You see their scope. I mean, the rook's not being interfered with because this one's almost tied down because of f7. I know the bishop's shielding f7 at the moment. But they're beautifully placed here. And white played the move g3 now. So asking black, you know, what is actually black doing? Okay, the bishop has shielded f7, which means the rook seems to have a breath of fresh air here. But now these entry points are stopped. It's king f1, taking out the entry point. With g3, this bishop was blunted for this diagonal, so you know we're not losing h2 in the process. So that also, you know, if we look at this cute little move g3 for the king to take these two squares for the only file that black could hope to get, so we're protecting this pawn. So that was a cute little sequence just there. So this beautiful bishop pair in the center still holds. Rook e7, setting up some little traps. You know, if Fischer's not going to fall in for this, if he moves his king, then bang, you know, we've got this. Or not, no, the bishop protects the rook. There's no trap at the moment, maybe in theory, but the king wants to stay on the light square in principle because it's a dark square bishop, just for tactical safety in general. If the opponent's only got one colour of a bishop, you put your king on the other. So anyway, bishop f6 here. Rook e3. I'm not sure black is in a great position to threaten anything in particular here. The bishop comes back here. We have the move h5, as though maybe h4 to try and weaken this structure. Now we have an immediate threat with rook a6. White is immediately threatening. Rook takes g6 because of that pin. So putting a halt to any h4 intention. Let's just see that. If h4 rook takes g6, this will just be horrible. Yeah, it would just be horrible for black. So black has to do something about rook g6. Or does he? It's difficult actually. You might think king h7, but still white is in a great position here. This could be pinned, for example, and it's a nice position with bishop a5 maybe to follow. So actually, bishop e5, funny enough, was played here. Bishop e5, inviting rook takes g6, but Fischer didn't go in for that. Let's have a quick look. He actually played bishop d2. So what's going on here? If rook takes g6 here, king h7, and we've still got this pressure on c3, so this would actually mess up things quite considerably, because then taking up on c3, we've messed up the pawn chain, and black's in the driving seat all of a sudden. The rooks have got activity. So no, he doesn't want to have his bishop pair robbed like this, going in for this pawn snatch. No, he plays actually bishop d2, hitting the rook, rook d3, and now the king steps in, hitting the rook, rook d4, and then on the forcing move, bishop c3, which basically forces winning the exchange. The rook can't move to g4 without losing e5, so black is virtually forced to give back. The exchange here, black is forced to play rook c takes c4 or something like that. You might think, hold on a sec, what just happened there? Why did black lose the exchange? Well, it seems actually, if you look at this position after bishop e5, there is a slight downside. This rook hasn't got too many squares, right? The bishop's covering f3. It's only got d3. So after this bishop d2, in fact, the rook was trapped here. Was actually trapped. Yeah, that was a bit sad. Fischer's won the exchange back by force. So after rook takes c4 here, bishop takes, rook takes. So he's not even material down now. But has he still got an advantage? He plays king d3, rook c5, and now actually takes on a5, which immediately gives, of course, white a fast, potentially useful a pawn outside a pawn. Is this really enough to win? Because isn't he losing b2 after this? Rook takes, bishop takes b2. Now let's look at this position. Is this actually, would you instantly say this is a winning endgame? We're equal on material. White has got this outside pass pawn. Would that necessarily be winning in this position? It's actually really bad for black here, funny enough. Fischer must have evaluated this long in advance. It does seem pretty bad. Particular reasons why. Let's see, after a4, if white is given some other moves, well, he's going to move the bishop out of the way and start moving the pawn down to a7. And bishop is having a hard time creating a blockade. We see king f8. And here, this is a little bit unfortunate, it seems, this position. Bishop c3, and black doesn't really want this king and pawn ending with the outside pass pawn. But how does black avoid it? If he plays bishop a3, which he didn't, he actually, Larsen took on c3, but if he plays bishop a3, let's suppose he plays bishop a3, a5, bishop d6, king c4, this kind of thing, it seems that this is going to be big trouble here. Bishop e5, bishop d4. This position, the king is much more active than this king, and we're getting into b7 and actually trivially winning this because of that a pawn. But what happened in the game is actually equally bleak to this variation after bishop c3, so that doesn't seem to help. This a pawn is already very dangerous. Let's see, bishop takes c3, king takes e3. Would you necessarily say this king and pawn ending is winning? Can you instantly evaluate this? Is white winning? I think this is another, it's like an essential tool, I think, as part of the mental toolkit to anticipate endgames that might come up, even if you're in the middle of a middle game, to know the endgame transitions and if they're good. And here it is good because the thing is, the general plan here is, you know, we can shove this up the board to get the king over there, and then this king can go over here and start munching these pawns. That's the general plan, and we see that. So king e7, king d4, king d6. We can use this as a distraction device to get the king over there. a5, f6, a6, and now the king has to start rushing over. a7, just sack it, whatever, because we get our king to munch all these pawns now. King's coming in to munch all the pawns. So it doesn't matter about losing one pawn there. King e6. And now Bent Larsen resigned here on move 46. So he's gone down 5-0. Yeah, now what do we take from such a game? Let me see a few key pointers. Let's go back. The first one is the bishop c4 system by Fischer seems actually really quite aggressive. He didn't waste a move with king h1, didn't need to. He blasted open this bishop, right, on this diagonal with this f5 as a pawn sacrifice. And actually, I do distinctly remember modern grandmasters like John Nunn using this. I think when I did a sacrifices video on John Nunn, I think he used such a thing against Peter Large in one of John Nunn's sacrifices. The idea of a temporary pawn sack here to get both bishops staring at black's king and then a rook lift is actually like a common attacking method here. So we've got both of these bishops really aggressive, and maybe, you know, black's best would have been to play e5, but then, you know, the d5 square. So there's always some downsides, but maybe as a lesser evil, you know, e5 might have been a lesser evil. But instead, you know, black, by accepting the pawn, he's opened up this bishop, and there seems to be very, very good compensation here after queen d3. But what was very interesting was when faced with the possible exchange of queens, it was welcomed here rather than retreat. It seems the pressure was just about good enough, even the pawn down temporarily here. So this position here is very difficult for black. In fact, you know, even this position, there's an exchange sack, say, like this. It's a very difficult position. You know, these bishops are kind of dangerous. You know, something like here, then there's rook takes f6. You know, we can end up pretty combination like that. So, you know, there were dangerous things in this position at the point where d5 was played. And then we get this rook g3, we get this exchange sack, which, yeah, does seem to be totally, like, positionally justified. But it was only for one pawn. It takes maybe some confidence that it's just one pawn for the exchange, but it seems to be enough here that black's rooks haven't got too much of a scope. And it seems that at a point here where white was slowly building up, maybe here, if this was a difficult position indeed here, because there was actually not just rook g6 but rook c6 on the cards. So yeah, this is getting to be a worse position by force. Black is losing the exchange back. But this transition with the outside pass pawn to recognize immediately that this is winning is pretty cool stuff. So he's like seems to have a very good grip on the resulting end games, just from all that very complex like middle game position. Okay, let's look at game 6 now. So game 6, so the final game of the match. Yeah, so Bent Larsen must have been pretty disheartened at this stage. But anyway, he played f4 against Fischer. So the bird's opening. Fischer plays classically c5. He wants to put pressure on the d4 square. This is the way Fischer plays it. Knight f3, g6, e4, bishop g7. So putting pressure on that d4 square. Bishop e2, knight c6. So all of black's pieces just looking at d4 here. Castles, d6, d3, e6. it's a very logical setup. The knight can go here, so f5 if needed later. Knight a3, knight Qe7, c3, black castles. There's even a few games here, even from here. Bishop e3, a6, d4 now, c takes. In this position, Ben Larsen played knight takes d4. If he plays c takes d4, we might be able to tease out control of a light square here with f5, try and weaken white's control of d5. For example, this looking a very comfortable position, nice blockade. So we have actually knight takes d4, and now black plays b5. So it looks to be, a classic idea, bishop b7, try and put pressure on the center like this. Knight takes, queen d2. Yeah, there's a slight concern about the d6 pawn here. Queen c7, white puts more pressure on d6. Rook d8, yeah, for the moment defending that. Knight c2, rook b8. It doesn't seem as though black has too many problems at the opening here. a3. And already, actually, after a3, it seems as though black's getting the upper hand, technically. This might not have been the most accurate move. The engine suggestion is actually to play this with the idea of bishop h4, actually. So say here, bishop h4. Try and cause black some problems like this, maybe. But yeah, the move a3 was played, and it seems black might be doing okay now after knight a5. There's, this is quite a nice move to try and play for, to get rid of white's light square bishop, getting rid of the bishop here. We have e5 here. Now black is not obliged to play d5. I think that's what white would welcome. If black played d5, then this is still quite comfortable for white. No, actually Fischer kept the tension by playing a seemingly passive move here, just protecting his d6 pawn. He plays actually bishop f8. And yes, what is black actually threatening here? Well, knight c4 is still on the cards, bishop b7. Okay, so we see b4. And actually knight c4 might not be the best now after b4. Let's see, if knight c4 maybe taking, and this using the pin, that's quite interesting. Actually Fischer played knight c6 here. And protecting the rook means that black is now threatening d takes, hitting the queen, with the knight protecting the rook. So he's trying to encourage white to take that pawn. This would be strategically bad if white played e takes d6. Let's have a quick look at that, because then we've got this bishop hemmed in by the pawn here. We've got a very comfortable position, in fact. We're looking at the queen now. If queen goes out of the way, it just looks very, very comfortable. So yeah, white doesn't want to play e takes d6. He actually played knight d4. And now we have d takes e5, f takes e5, knight takes e5, now being a pawn. Is this a brilliant pawn sacrifice by white? How much compensation is there? Bishop g5 hitting the rook. The rook actually goes to d5, knowing that there's no bishop f3 here, we can knock that off. Queen f4. Maybe the idea like bishop f6 to put pressure on that pin. Now that's extinguished with bishop g7 defending against that. White seems to have pieces, in black's king's vicinity, plays h4, rook b7, and now exchanges off what seems to be a key defender, bishop f6. Fischer takes this, queen takes, and wins another pawn. Queen takes c3. Isn't this really dangerous? Isn't this like dangerous? Let's see. h5. 2 pawns up though. It does seem a bit scary to do this now, but he did actually take on h5 here. This might not be technically the best move, actually. Technically, it seems queen e3 check and coming back here might actually have been an improvement. But let's see. So he took on h5, so 3 pawns up, but has white got compensation? King h1 was played. Knight g4, hitting the queen. White took this, h takes, and now queen h6, and immediately with queen h6, rook c1 is threatened to skewer the queen and the bishop here. Fischer sees this, funny enough. He plays bishop d7, and now we have rook f4, threatening to mate to the black king, but f5. Okay, so black is material up still. Now if white wanted to, well, he's already kind of lost the match basically, but he could try and get some sort of perpetual check. You know, maybe checking here and then just perpetual check time. But no, he didn't. He played queen f6. Maybe it's got more promising for trying to win the game with something like this, and then taking here, try and look at f8. But Fischer's move, he plays actually bishop c8, which means now that rook f7 is on the cards. This seems to be an adequate defense. Rook f1, rook f7, kicking the queen. Queen h6. And now we have bishop b7, x-raying the king here. Now let's have a look at how tactically useful this move is. Well, black is simply threatening to take on d4 here. We have knight takes e6, and okay, in this position you might think, is it tempting to kind of use this tactical stuff? If rook takes d1, this actually doesn't bode well. Rook takes queen h3 is a way of getting mated, actually, because rook d8 is mating. that wouldn't work too well. That wouldn't be a fantastic idea to get mated like this. No, there's better ways of using the pin on g2 here. In fact, Fischer played queen f6, and this repels the attack completely. This just refutes the attack. So this position might have been like tempting to try and use the diagonal. And another way, which actually just equalizes only, check here, by the way. If takes here, rook d2 check, there's a perpetual check, and that would have won the match anyway. There's perpetual check here, if nothing else. Yeah, no, but queen f6 is actually winning. Why draw when you can win? Queen f6 is actually a crushing blow here. What does white do? Where's the attack after this? Queen e3, having to go into a pin now. That's pretty nasty. Rook d e1, rook d6, and black is just material up now. the queen's come off, yeah, to try and save the knight. Queen g5, but he's like pawns down. Yeah, pretty miserable end to the match. He's 2 pawns down. Bishop d5 after check. King g7, and now white resigned. Yeah, it's not a brilliant position, 2 pawns down. So yeah, he got wiped out 6-0. And I think this was actually good news for Taimanov. I think the Russians couldn't be so angry at Taimanov losing 6-0 because the great Larsen then lost 6-0. So I think, you know, in a way, I suspect, I haven't read anything concrete on it, but it would have been doing the previous victim a favour to also lose 6-0. So Fischer then was on the way next to meet Petrosian. And something weird happens to me actually when I look at Fischer versus Petrosian games. I can't explain it, but I'm pretty sure it happens. I think I'm usually more enthusiastic than usual. There's something very peculiar, very interesting about Petrosian's style of chess, especially in matches. I think he was a nightmare in matches, not tournament play. I think when he was world champion, Petrosian hardly won any tournaments. And Spassky kind of said, you know, he shouldn't be like king of chess. But in matches, all Petrosian needed to do was draw every single game except for one, which he won, and he'd win a match. And that's how he became world champion. That's how he toppled Botvinnik. So this is a very formidable match opponent that Fischer was up against, which we'll carry on, you know, looking at next week. The great Tigran Petrosian had a very, very interesting style to try and prevent the opponent's attacks even before they had dreamed up anything. So that's why he was called like the master of prophylaxis. So I think, you know, that kind of interests me greatly, that peculiarity of Petrosian. So was he going to get whitewashed? But let's have a look. If you want a brief overview of this game again, it was quite a complex game. Or should we have a quick revision of this game? So that was 6-0. So let's have a quick revision here. So it started with f4, and you know, this is very classical play by Fischer, controlling the central key d4 square. This is just very, very sensible play. And it seems, you know, one issue though which had to be dealt with was the d6 one. I think Fischer was acutely aware of the sort of pawn structures which are favourable and those which are not. And like one temptation was not to play d5. I think many of us would have played d5, and that would have just given white quite a comfortable position. It's like it would then feel like a kind of French defence style position, where, you know, white's got kind of things like this, and it's a very comfortable position with the knight kind of justified. A lot of us would have messed it up already playing d5. I mean, let's be honest. Shall we be honest about this? How many of us tempted to play d5? Be honest. You would have played d5, wouldn't you? How many of you would have played bishop f8 in a real game? It's just so much stronger. You know, I mean, it's everything put together really. All the subtle positional moves. You know, it's the tactics after. You know, but the positional play is pretty good. I mean, it seems like a passive move, but he has to have a good pawn structure. He can't have this position with d5. It's just unacceptable at this level to give white a free hand in the centre like that. He's keeping the tension, and we saw how powerful keeping the tension here was when the knight retreated, protecting the rook. With that, we're now, you know, going to win that pawn. And although, you know, we're opening up the f file, you know, then he has to deal with those issues, you know, for defence. So b4, and another positional decision immediately was to put the knight on c6. How many of us would have played knight c4 here? It seems quite tempting to play this. But actually, tactically, white can then exploit d6. This would be a bit of a blunder. But not like e takes d6. Maybe that's not a strong, just bishop c5. Maybe Fischer saw this, that, you know, this kind of tactic actually encourages d5. Because what else is there here? Otherwise, we are losing a pawn for nothing, right? If we played this, we're losing a pawn for nothing. So if we're forced to play d5 here, we've basically conceded the d4 square, and again white would have been, you know, better here. This is better for white, better knight versus bishop, nightmare scenario, all avoided because Fischer kind of recognized maybe this important tactic with positional implication, that white's bearing down this d file and he doesn't want to play d5 under any circumstance. So he notes down that particular tactic. So the knight had retreated to c6. But how many of us would have played knight c4 there and fallen for that? Quite a few of us again. Okay, so we have this situation then where e5 now is under pressure. So he wins his first pawn and is not scared because he can't see how he's concretely losing this. So bishop g5, we have this rook d5, queen f4, and things are looking really dangerous now for bishop f6. And okay, bishop g7, and we have this odd looking move here, rook b7, which helps free the queen actually, so we can take care and defend. So bishop f6, so then we can actually, because the queen's been freed, we can win another pawn. And then, you know, maybe a slight slip up. It seems the engine suggests check and queen h6 actually. Maybe this is a bit greedy, but all he needed to do was draw this, so he didn't care about the perpetual checks. So maybe, you know, he didn't care if there's a perpetual check possibility. So he took that pawn, you know, king h1, knight g4, and yeah, bishop d7, and then we have this f5 defending, queen f6. The only way for white to have drawn this now, queen g5 apparently draws technically with checks, but white played this, and now he's in a lost, like in a losing position after bishop c8, with this rook f7 to evict the queen soon. So bishop b7 sets up a lot of cheapos actually here behind the scenes, but that's all forsaken. The cheapos, which don't quite work. Well, they draw. Queen h3 at least draws, but no, queen f6 wins. So why not play that to win the match and start this horrible pin? Where else was the queen going here? Doesn't want to. Well, he's just 2 pawns down basically. He's 2 pawns down. It's lost. It's over. Okay, so yeah, it's really amazing stuff. The decisions. It's like positional play, you know, tactics, classical style, nothing too controversial, and just, yeah, winning 6-0. It's amazing. So he's won 12 games there in a row in these 2 first matches. Okay, I hope you got something from that. See you next week. Comments or questions on YouTube. Okay. Thanks very much.